Hey folks, and welcome to this week's blog from me anyway. I thought I'd do a little bit of a video to start to kind of dive into some of the thoughts that I want you thinking about when we do our blogs this Thursday. So at this point, you've all had a chance to read a little bit of the 5 practices for orchestrating discussions, and you've kind of hopefully starting to get this idea of like, what does it mean to anticipate, monitor, select, sequence, and connect. And that's where I want us to really go this week. There's this quote that I'm not sure, I can't remember where it came from, that says, to listen well is as powerful a means of influence as to talk well, and is an essential to all true conversation. And I think that really connects this idea of like the people that are doing the talking are the ones doing the learning. I think a challenge that faces us STEM educators of all levels is how to engage students in their content through really rich discussion or discourse in the math world, or discussion and argumentation kind of in that science education world. In classrooms where there's high quality discourse, argumentation, so on, teachers and students are able to ask challenging and thought-provoking questions. And there's a skillful facilitation of meaningful discussions focus on this content. Discussions that emphasize reasoning, evaluation, justification. In these scenarios, students learn from one another and value the thinking of their peers. The focus of this conversation is not just to necessarily answer problems, right? There is one answer, or I want you to learn something from reading this paragraph, but also students can think about strategies, discoveries, conjectures, reasoning. And so there's 2 things that I'm going to talk about in my post. I'm going to talk about, start getting into this idea of standards, because we're going to dive into that later on in this semester. And on the math side, there are the Common Core standards, which are kind of the closest to a national standard that we have. And then on the science side, we have the next generation science standards. And you'll see below that I'm not going to be talking about the content standards here. I'm going to be talking about the practice standard, which is the other standards that end up happening in both of these documents. And you'll see in the blog below that there's quite a big focus on discussion, argumentation, conversation in math and science. And so I highlight a couple of them in each of the content areas as kind of like evidence that this becomes something that we really want to dive into. And so what I want you to do is I want you to kind of think about these standards of practice on both sides for math and science. You can choose whichever one you want to focus on, or if you want to dive into both, by all means. And then I want you to write a little bit about how you think it connects to these 5 practices that you've been reading about and that we're going to dive into likely in class on Thursday. What does it mean to anticipate? Once you're in the class, how do you think about monitoring, selecting, sequencing, and connecting? And I want you to kind of like choose at least one of them as the focus of your blog for this post. The other thing I really want you to do is I want you to kind of explore Ghost a little bit and kind of see if there's one thing that you can add that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone. So maybe it might be adding a video or like bringing in some music or something along those lines. And as always, if you need any help, just shoot me an email and I'd love to. Be well all.